What's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another player interview. This time I have a very guest I am privileged to have on the channel, Scott Dashy. How you doing tonight, Scott?
What's going on, guys?
That was really weird. I just called you Scott, but I always call you Dashy. I'm gonna go forward calling you Dashy. All right, Dashy. So you did a thing this weekend. What did you do this weekend at the Dragon Ball Super Nationals?
So I competed, and I ended up making 29th seed out of 400 plus players. So I made top 32. And I did it with Janemba.
Nice. How did your top cut go?
I played Rishi. I played a Storm deck, blue-yellow, and my deck has a good matchup against it, but I ended up losing in game 3 with time called in the final turns, 1 card difference, crazy stuff.
Yeah. So how do they determine time and top cut since it can't be a draw? I'm curious.
Okay, so what happened when in game 3, time gets called, and then instead of doing 0, 1, 2, 3, it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then after that, if both players still don't win, it goes to life count. Whoever has less life loses. And if life is equal, it's how many cards are in deck. More cards wins.
And it went to cards in deck?
It went to like turn like 4 in time, and then he killed me.
Oh, okay. I was about to scream to the high heavens that you had less cards in deck than your opponent. You're playing Janemba, but anyways, all right, cool. So congratulations on that. That's super awesome. You have a very interesting Janemba mill list that my teammates played a very different version of the list. So I'm actually really excited to dissect this. All right, so Janemba mill leader. If you don't know what he does, on both sides when he attacks, draws a card. Makes your opponent mill 2 off top of the deck. On the awakened side, he has an auto where you can discard any blue card. And he negates the attack basically. So if you didn't know what he does, we'll get right into the main deck. So Kami Global Unifier, why this as like your utility 1-drop black card over something like Dende or Cronoa?
Okay, so like right before the event, I was deciding I had slots open, and for those of you players out there who are tinkering with your decks and stuff, you do realize that there's some splash cards you can fit in like Kami or Cronoa and whatever else, and I decided that Kami was the best choice because Storm, a lot of Storm decks, they'll throw out 2 or 3 guys at a time, and then sometimes they'll get really greedy and throw out Grandpa Gohan, throw out a 4th Goten or whatever. They'll drop a big board, and then on my turn I can drop the Kami. They don't see it coming and then blow up their entire board, and that's a lot of actions that they no longer have. And Kami in general is just really good against veggies. And I did play a veggies deck, and it makes your opponent play differently. That's why I ran it over anything else. Any other tech cards like 1-drops, I ran it because it makes your opponent play differently throughout the entire game. They can never drop 4 or more guys because they have that fear.
Yeah, totally. And like this is a deck that does not want to get sworn because it wants to live a long game. And Kami actually, yes, I think is a really good card in the main board because going into game 2 and 3, you can think to yourself, oh, I need to play around Kami now. But getting caught off guard in the main board is actually really solid. So next up, you have the Shenron figure Majesty. So this is a very different card that I don't see in a lot of Janemba decks. Why did you choose to play this card in this deck?
Okay, so yeah, this is gonna be an interesting one.
It's a really cool pick.
I chose Shenron because against Cell Chain or Super 17 Chain, they're gonna knock my hand down. And Shenron draws a card to activate his effect pretty much. And so if my hand is really low, I can activate his effect, draw a card, and then infinitely keep playing, East Kai or Psyche Demon or something and keep boosting my hand up back to what it was. But mostly what it's used for is against like anything that scares me on the offense. I can keep cycling Yajirobe. And so that they're always terrified of I infinitely bring out Yajirobe. And so it stalls the game out until I mill them to death.
Dude, that's a dope pick. That's a really dope pick. I like that a lot. All right, so then we have the Psyche Demon standard. We have the East Kai. We have the 4 Senzu Bean, the 4 Magic, which is just you got to play it. You're playing a blue leader. You got to play it for Storm. 2 Mafuba in the main deck. So another what I would say more is typically a side deck card. Why did you decide to include this in the main board?
All right, well, first I want to just shout out about East Kai is that East Kai was probably a mistake on my part because I know that it brings, I know it puts a card from your opponent's hand to the bottom if they play something on, my turn, and that never happened throughout the entire tournament, but it could be Boo. you know, it could be the one drop boo if you have to have it that way, because it is 5,000. It can attack some of the 5,000 one drops and kill them and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But so that's one thing I kind of sort of regret. But as for Mafuba, I do not regret putting Mafuba in my main, because I was afraid of Victory Strike. I was afraid of the number one thing I was afraid of was Gogeta, the Gogeta hand control, because Gogeta gets hurt by Mafuba if I draw into the Mafuba, and Mafuba won me numerous games.
Nice.
So I'm glad I had it in the main board.
Nice. And a lot of kind of bouncing off this, a lot of cards I noticed that, or one card I noticed that doesn't really make it in a lot of Janemba lists, which I can see it, but I also can't see it, like Zeno Button. You know, you're playing a mono blue deck, you're playing 12 super combos. Did you ever tinker around with playing Zeno Button in the deck, or no? Okay,
so I roomed with actually the champion, Jordan Markle. I roomed with Tim Sweeney and Ryan Severin, and they were giving me crap about not running Zeno Button because everyone else was running Zeno Button. But I feel like Zeno Button, if I'm in like a battle to save any of my board from dying, or even myself from dying, if I like super combo into a Zeno Button, it's like a dead draw. In general, it makes using Zeno Button in your main board, if you're running blue, like if you're running like a mono blue Hercule deck, it makes you play differently. It makes you think that you can just tap out at will, and then just, I'm gonna just, you know, Zeno Button and untap. But little do you know that if you play against a yellow deck, if you tap out and you try to Zeno Button to rebuild your energy, they can just battering laser it, and then you lose instantly. So I never wanted to be in that mode. I wanted to be in the mode of like always playing conservatively, never tapping out, always keeping one blue open. So I never wanted to have that, you know, I always kept one blue open for Sensu Bean or whatever else I had to. I didn't like Zeno Button. I don't think it's that good of a card in this kind of deck. It's good in Hercule though, but
that's actually really cool. Like that you didn't play a good card, you know, arguably good card, because it put you in a certain mindset. That's pretty awesome. Some pretty dope words of wisdom from the great Dashy himself. So you kind of just bounced me back to a thought I should have asked you in the beginning, but you kind of just sparked my memory. Why did you decide to play Janemba in the first place?
Because basically, when I first saw him, Ryan Severin knows this. When I first saw him previewed, I was like, this is ridiculously broken, and it was on the down low. Like I was hoping that the community in general didn't see what I saw in him and how broken I thought he was. Well, I still think he's kind of broken, but he just is a total leader. Like, he's complete on both sides. He's just really good, draws cards, puts your opponent in a spot always, makes it play differently. And also because of the math behind him. We did a lot of math involving like the logic based off how many turns it would take to kill your opponent, especially if they were Hercule, if they were androids, and blah, blah, blah. And it just was mathematically sound to run him. But there's obviously many variants in the main board that you can run in many different ways. But I also felt that, like, the first, again, you know this, Joey, like, the first event after a new set comes out, the meta's wide open, so I can get away with running Janemba. Whereas maybe next time I can't, like in Orlando or whatever. So
totally. Yeah, that's pretty dope. The math comes in a lot, especially where you're trying to, you know, mill your opponent out. You want to know exactly when you can and can't mill them out if you hit your demon swords, things like that. So why 4 Yajirobe the main board?
Oh, that was the first day, first moment I made the deck. I knew I put 4 Yajirobe in there. I had to, because like that to me is like one of the most. It is an ultimate stall card. It has insane synergy with Shenron, as I mentioned earlier. I
like that play a lot. Yeah.
It makes your opponent play differently constantly. If they do not have an answer for Yajirobe, they can't do anything. Yajirobe, again, I was focused. I thought that Gogeta was going to be the #1 deck, even over Storm this past weekend. I thought that everyone was going to run the Gogeta hand control, and Yajirobe kills Gogeta. Mm-hmm. You know, Gogeta's this massive drop. But if they burn my hand away and, you know, they attack me or whatever happens, the next turn I can drop a Yajirobe, and odds are they're not going to have an answer. Or I can drop a Shenron and get Yajirobe back out, or something. You know, that's another answer like Mafuba is to Gogeta. And just in general, he just stalls the game out, and I want to stall the game out. So
totally, I like it a lot. Definitely. The Sparking Super Combo, Child Charge Janemba, 4 Demon Sword, no Reality Bender. Why are there no Reality Bender in this deck? Scott Dashy, please tell me why.
Man, I got my. Can I say ass on this? I got my ass.
Sure, we'll let it go.
I got my ass chewed out like a piece of bubble gum for not. I think I might have been the only person running Janemba that did not run Reality Bender mainboard, and I didn't run it mainboard because I figured that, like, first of all, Reality Bender, if your opponent knows what they're doing against Janemba, they're going to try to avoid keeping guys on the board to get, so I can, you know, really trigger Janemba's ability to only plan for one energy. And like that rare, like, you know what I'm saying? So I was like, and plus I think Demon Sword is just broken as hell, because you can keep getting him back out, warping your opponent's threats, put him to the bottom, Psyche Demon gets it back to hand, or you can get the, you know, the Childish Heart Janemba keeps looping him. And I tested in the games that I tested, I just always wanted Demon Sword out because it clears the board of threats and goes to the bottom and keeps looping, and that's what I wanted over Reality Bender. And to me, it worked great. I'm glad I did not run Reality Bender in my main board.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Then we have the 4 Vegito. So I'm curious, what's the typical curve? Is it Shenron then Vegito, or Vegito then Shenron?
It's usually almost always Vegito over Shenron, because you gotta have the protection first. Once you get the protection, you can get the lockout with Shenron.
Okay.
And then you can keep looping, you know, Yajirobis, or keep drawing a lot of cards with East Kai.
That makes sense. Makes sense. All right, so we'll hop over to the side deck. Ask you about that a little bit. All right, so we got 2 Dark Power Black Mass Sand. What did you bring this in against most of the time? Like, what matchups did you face that you needed this card?
So, again, another sleeper deck I thought was going to be around a lot more was Pan. Against Pan and against Shenron. So Shenron uses Child's Wish or World Peace, and that almost always triggers Dark Power Black Mass Saiyan's effect if they get a 15,000 or less. And again, against Pan, they have the free play Vegeta, they have the negate Videl, and so just to stall, it's a card that stalls the game out. So that's why I have it in there against certain matchups.
Very nice. Dende coming in against different ramp decks. Did you ever miss playing Objection in your deck, or not so much?
Yeah, that was an option I thought of, but again, I was so afraid of, like, Xenobun. I was so afraid to draw a dead card,
right?
If I was trying to live, that I didn't have it. I did side in Dende. It was a funny thing, and in the tournament, I sided in Dende once, and the one game I sided it in, my opponent sided out all of his objections, and I was like, dude, are you? He told me after the game. He's like, yeah, I did. So in game 3, I sided him back out and put Kami's back in. So no, but Dende again makes your opponent play differently. If they object too early, you can kind of screw them. And the looping Dende with Shenron is absurd.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
Can draw a card off, draw a lot of cards and burn energy. So
the fact that Dende remembers the entire game that your opponent charged with a skill is honestly pretty stupid.
Yes.
Absolutely. And then we have the 3 Crisis Crusher. How did these perform for you? I feel like people are realizing that this card in general is really lackluster against Storm, but how did it perform for you throughout the weekend?
I am so glad that you just said. I'm going to tell my friends to listen to what you just said, because I said so the hotel room the night before, after I made the promo video, they were talking trash to me about, you need Crisis Crusher against Storm, and I said no, it's not good against Storm. Whoa, you can attack with Bardock 1-drop. I'm like, a lot of good Storm players aren't going to attack with Bardock because they're terrified of Pilaf, they're terrified of Mafuba, they're terrified of all these things, so they won't. And that's only one card. But I have Crisis Crusher in there for the red-blue Rush variant, which I didn't play once. I don't think I even saw any red-blue variant with the old school Hirudegarn with Cabas and the crit trunks and anything like that.
Yeah.
I didn't see any of that, so I never sided in once the entire tournament. But you have to have it there, because if you play that, it helps you. But I never sided in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the only thing you really get out of siding in versus Storm is you make them lose maybe 20-30% of their attacks, but they're really unimpactful attacks. They already got the value off the Bardock. They bring it back to hand and they play the Goten and they just kick you in the face. So
Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree. 2 Haru. How much green yellow did you play against this weekend?
I did not. I think I sided in Haru once, and I think I played 1 green or yellow leader. I played an Androids deck and I sided it in, but it, the games that I dropped it was, I was winning, but it wasn't it's not necessary. It's like a win more card.
Right. It's really helpful in the scenarios.
it's really yeah.
Yeah, especially because Janemba does have somewhat of a tough time against Cell Chain usually. So if you can dump your hand down for value, it's really good. I've been in situations too where like you have to make room in the sideboard for more cards, so Har gets knocked down to 2. But if you can make sideboard 3 and just drop that many against Cell, it just feels so good. So what did you want the third Shenron in against?
Cell Chain or Super 17 Chain, because if they burn my hand or Gogeta, because if they burn my hand down, I can drop one of the 3 and then again boost my hand back up. Makes
sense. So. Yeah, it almost acts as like the third Har in that sense. But so a question with the third Shenron and the Yajirobe, you know, you're talking about playing these cards to kind of outplay the 7 drop Gogeta, which I think is really good. But were you ever afraid that those same decks would be playing the Gogeta 5?
That's the risk I took. And I did play decks that ran Gogeta the 5 drop, and lucky enough it wasn't played against me. People had it in their deck, but it was milled out and they never drew it and they never played it against me. I was never, and I took the risk. That's
very fair, and it paid off for you really well. That's awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that. I was curious about it, but yeah, it's a risk you got to take. And then we have the 2 Whis for more defense, Pilaf for different things like Storm. Did you actually have it sitting against Storm or no?
Yeah, I would take out I took out like the Shenrons against some Storm decks because I wanted more blue energy to survive the early game.
Right.
And also because if they saw it, they'd be afraid to attack with Bardock, and it did work. They did not attack with Bardock ever. They would be afraid to do that. So, yes, I decided against Storm.
Yep. And what better point to wrap this video up with than why on God's green earth you played one reality better Janemba? Why you played one reality better Janemba in your side deck? Please tell me.
I felt like I had to run it, especially against I only sided in against Mirror Match, and that was it. And the only reason why I sided in against Mirror Match because I know about the other variants of Janemba. I don't know the exact list, but I know that they can get way more aggro and way more board presence and like really scary. And so I figured if I play against a Mirror Match, I got to mill them out before they mill me out. And that's just the 5th out that I have, or actually like 9th out that I have to play another Janemba. So in case they mill my Demon Swords, I have another out, and I would side him in against Mirror Match. It did help. So that was the only time I sided him in, though.
Totally, yeah. My teammates played more. I would say more of like an aggressive Janemba build, like with Double Strike Champas and at all cost Vegeta, things like that. But your build is very interesting. I'm actually a really big fan of it. With the Shenron, I think is dope. Just helps you get more control over the course of the game. So super sweet deck list, man. Congrats again. Glad to hear you tops. You know, I mean, hear it. I was there, but yeah, super awesome. And thank you for doing this video with me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man.
All right, cool. So that's gonna end this video. There's actually part 1 of 2 of Dashy interviews. I got another dope deck that'll be probably coming out next week with Scott Dashy and his brilliant mind. So stay tuned for that. Dashy, you want to give any shout outs? You want to sign off in any particular way?
Yeah, I do want to say something. I want to say something about one of my opponents that I played this past weekend.
Oh man, don't get me banned. Don't get me banned from YouTube. All right.
No. I gotta give this guy a shout out. Hanson Taravella. I played him last round. This is important. This is about the culture of gaming and stuff like that, and this is like a really good lesson.
Okay.
I played him in round 9, and it was a mirror match. He was running Janemba, and I beat him game 1, and the game 1 went pretty long. In game 2, he pulled it out, but it wasn't like, it was barely pulling out, and he beat me, and there was hardly any time for a game 3. And you could tell that I was distraught because whether I could have won that game, whatever, it was really close. Automatically made top 32. But in any sense, game 3 had started, and time was called, and at that point I knew it was like, oh, I'm gonna have to play for a tie. I just want to get the top 50% of players, whatever. And Hanson had taken it upon himself to he said, you know what, man, whether he thought I deserved to win in game 2 or whatever, he had just said, you know what, take the win so we don't get a tie, because he had forfeited the in game 3. There was no collusion or anything like that, no shady stuff. People were around, and I said, dude, you don't have to do that. And he said, no, I don't want either of us to tie, so we both get screwed. You take the win. Whether, again, like I said, whether he thought I deserved to win that or whatever, because both of us were, in the spot to win, but he decided that he wanted to give me the win on that because I won game 1 and almost won game 2. But that's an important lesson, and I know I'm not gonna try to get sentimental here, but that's something you rarely see, and it took him a lot of courage to do that, and that's paying it forward. That's like some absurd stuff. I even I was like, what can I do for you? Like, can I buy you dinner or something? And he didn't want anything. So keep an eye out for Hanson Taravella for doing that. I appreciate that, and I told him that repeatedly. And again, good lesson to players out there that it's more than just about decks, building a deck, winning tournaments. It's about sportsmanship. So remember that. Even though I'm salty, people might look when I'm salty, but that's a good lesson and he's not the only one. There's a lot of other players out there with good hearts, but that is something that is absurd, and I'll never forget that. So thank you, Hanson.
Dude, that is an awesome story. I'm so, and you guys were both on the bubble at that point?
Yeah. Yep.
Dude, that just takes a really big man to do that. That's super awesome. I think that's a great note to end this video on. All right. Thank you so much, Dashy. And
no problem.
We'll see you on the next video.